Welcome to the Head Shepherd podcast. I'm your host, Mark Ferguson, CEO here at NextGen Agri International, where we help livestock managers get the best out of their stock. Before we get started, thank you to our two fantastic sponsors for continuing to sponsor this podcast. MSD Animal Health is perhaps better known as Cooper's Animal Health in Australia and for their Allflex range across the world, with a comprehensive suite of animal health and management products. Honiger is a one-stop shop for wool harvesting and animal fibre removal. The Honiger team have a deep understanding of livestock agriculture, backed by Swiss engineering and a family business dedicated to manufacturing the best. We are grateful to our sponsors for their support, helping us bring Head Shepherd to you each week. And now it's time to get on with this week's episode. Welcome back to Head Shepherd. Hopefully you're having a great Easter. If you're listening to this on the day it's released, it'll be Easter Monday. And hope you've had a great one. I've certainly enjoyed some time with the family. Plenty of time on the end of a fishing rod and really enjoying time with the boys and my brother and his kids and our whole family, mum and dad. So it's been really great. Also caught up with my other brother earlier in the week. So, fantastic time with family in Australia and hope you've had something similar. This week on The Hub, we've released an article written by Phoebe Eckerman around the myths of genomics, or busting the myths of genomics. Genomics has become such an important part of our breeding programs across all species and utilised fairly heavily depending on what we're up to. But, a great article written by Phoebe, and I hope you jump on The Hub and have a read. Again, it's a great place to go. Our recent live was on foot rot, and that's now up there as a recorded episode. And so if you're interested in feet health in sheep, then that's something to check out. The Hub's full of great information. So, hopefully you jump on there and have a look around. This week on the show, we've got Ben Law, the Financial Bloke. I really enjoyed my chat with Ben. He's a wealth of information. He's doing great things for farming families, for those that he works with his mastermind and direct consulting. He's all about building intergenerational wealth in farming families. So not so much just the succession piece that we might always often discuss. It's more about how do we get everyone in the right mindset to continue to grow a business, because we obviously know that the old story, I suppose, one generation to build it, one to keep it steady, and then one to lose everything. And so that, I guess his mission is to reduce that, but obviously to focus around the finances or the business sort of decisions around farming. So hopefully you enjoy this episode. We'll get into that one now. Cheers. Welcome, Ben Law, to Head Shepherd.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ferg. Great to be here, mate. This is my third, I think I've done in the last while, being on the other side of the desk. And the first couple were a bit nerve-wracking, but I'm actually getting to enjoy it now. So I'm looking forward to today.
It is fun. It's always interesting when you're interviewing a fellow podcaster. I think, I reckon it makes you be a little bit better knowing that they also know what they're up to on the other side of the microphone. But, I guess, AKA the Financial Bloke, Ben, we'll start back in, I guess, pre what you do now and back home on the farm growing up, I think cattle farm in Queensland, is that right? And so I guess early days were in ag?
Yeah, so mate, New South Wales, so not far away. I do live in Queensland now, but I grew up on a cattle and cropping place in northwest New South Wales on the northwest slopes and plains, and my parents are still on the farm down there now. I would have been fourth generation, mate. So that's how I grew up and loved the cattle industry. So that was always my love. And then went off to university, studied, knew there wasn't enough space for me to come back on the farm. Succession was just terribly done in my family. That's a discussion for another day. But it was essentially my grandfather or my grandparents, my mum and dad and my auntie and uncle all involved. And so I went off in the world, mate, and studied at uni, fell into financial advice and spent 20-odd years, I'll say odd, 20-odd years helping farmers grow, protect and transition wealth. So made wealthy farmers a lot wealthier. And then, in 2020, I'm sure everyone's heard the thing, I had a health scare and woke up one day and went, you know what? I've done as much as I can in my industry. I've grown a successful business. I've won awards. I've got a great practice, and I decided to retire from financial advice, and then spent a year doing nothing other than mowing the lawns and spending time with my daughter over COVID. And then, kicked off the podcast and got into strategic coaching. And that's where I'm at now, mate.
Excellent. So I've often wondered, why everyone needs a health scare to change gear. Not everyone, but most people, it's often something that triggers them. And that isn't, I guess haven't got time to get into that too far, but that was obviously a big reflection time just to sit back and go, right, what's important to me?
Yeah, and I'll be blunt. The laws are very stubborn, mate, and my daughter's inherited that trait. So I usually say the universe gives me subtle little notes saying, "Hey, you need to change tact here, Ben." But sometimes I need a good whack over the head, and that was enough for me. And I was one of the lucky ones, Ferg. A guy down the road from me, within the circle of friends, he had the same thing happen, but his wife got a call saying he was dead with two young kids. So, yeah, I'm eternally grateful that nothing majorly bad happened. It was just a wake-up call. And, yeah, it's been possibly the best, not the best. I'm married and I've got a kid, so I can't say the best, but one of the best things that's ever happened to me.
Yeah, it's amazing how often you hear that hardship brings out a change that ends up being a great change. Then we want to get into, I guess, what you do these days, and that's helping businesses, I'm not going to say go through succession, but set themselves up to sort of to generate intergenerational wealth, I think is probably the way that you would put it maybe. But I guess what you do now and kind of why you made that shift. I mean, it's still in financial aspects, but it's obviously much deeper than that these days.
Well, mate, the reason is I spent, as I said, that time as a financial advisor helping people make more money, because I was of the opinion in my life and from seeing in my childhood is if farmers made more money and became more profitable and become better farmers and their balance sheet became stronger, all their problems would disappear. But what I came to realise over all the time that I was a financial advisor is farmers, some problems disappeared, but they just evolved into different problems. And so they're the real serious problems which plague farming. And I'm not talking about the weather or politics or markets. I'm talking about the family. It's the individual success and happiness. It didn't solve any of those problems. So I basically have pivoted into a role where I actually help families essentially get on the same page. So aligning families, help them keep growing their family wealth and protect it, and ultimately transition it to the next generation. And so I'm actually not in what I'd call the traditional succession space. So I'm not in the, hey, the kids have come home, they're ready to go, mum and dad are ready to retire, let's transition that. That's for a succession facilitator or a mediator. I'm in the 5 to 10 to 15 years before succession. So setting families up for that explosive growth in their business, but also to how to align the family, work on communication skills, build a roadmap for succession. So when succession comes around, it just becomes a smooth and easy process.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to know how people know that they're going to need this before they need this. And that's, I guess, always quote that no one knew they needed an iPhone until it was invented. And then we worked out it was the most amazing invention ever. And I think sometimes in obviously preempting what's going to happen over the next 15 years, often people need to be in a bad place before they think about things like how we're going to transfer this wealth. But obviously there's people out there that are seeing the signs early and are making some positive change.
Yeah, the pain of doing something has to become less of the pain of doing nothing. That's usually what happens. And so people come along and usually, like in most families, you'll see they get to that, they either hit that frustration level in their 40s. Quite often you'll see it where they've worked for 20, 30 years. They hit that frustration level like, I'm not growing, I'm not getting anywhere, I'm doing all this hard work, I'm no longer profitable, and they make a change. Or they get to their 60s and 70s and they go, I'm worn out, I'm tired. Mum says, I don't want to do this anymore. And then all the kids are knocking on the door. So there's these real pain points, and that's when most people take action. The reality is, though, is that people have to take action earlier. And the example I give, Ferg, always is, have you ever hurt your back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So much.
Yeah. And so what usually happens, like I've done it in the past, is you go to the chiro, the physio, the doctor, whatever, and they give you some exercises and some painkillers, anti-inflammatories. And you go, oh, yeah, fantastic. I'm going to do all these exercises because I just want to be well. And then all of a sudden, 2 weeks in, your back's feeling good again. You stop the exercises, you stop going back to the chiro, the physio, and you think, wow, I'm right. And then 6 months later, what do? You hurt your back again. And this cycle goes on and on and on. And that's human beings. Now, the trigger that I see for most people, Ferg, not all, but the main trigger I see for people who is they've been through a shitty succession with their family. And they've seen the impact of when they don't plan and they don't prepare themselves, the business and the next generation. They go and they say something to me like, hey, Ben, we don't want to go through this shit with our kids. It destroyed the relationship between mum and dad or my brothers and sisters and I. We don't want the same for our kids. And then they also say, we don't want the same for ourselves. Like, we see the stress that it caused on mum and dad and the family. We don't want to go through that. So that pain is still fresh in their mind. And so they go, righto, we need to do something about it sooner rather than later. And they're usually the ones that put their hands up and say, yep, what do we need to do? The problem is and I'd love for people to reach out and correct me, but when I got out of my old financial advice business years ago, I looked around and went, well, who is in this space? Who is helping prepare the family, prepare the business, and prepare the next generation for succession? And there's just not dedicated services to that. So if you've got a tax problem, you say, I go see an accountant. You got a legal problem, you go see a lawyer. You go, I've got this issue with, I need to grow the business and I want to get my family on the same page and I'm feeling burnt out and my mindset's wrong. Who do you go see?
Yeah.
And I can guarantee it's not Ghostbusters, that's for sure.
as much fun as it would be. But yeah. You know our generation when you're quoting Ghostbusters, although it has been a more recent movie, but that's, some people might be back on the same page, but certainly dating us. I've already got that tune in my head now, which is a bit of a worry. I guess when that phone does ring, or you get that email, or what is that process that you go through with those families? Typically what are the challenges in front of you to get them all on the same page?
Well, usually the trigger is someone usually finds out that there's something you can do to actually prepare your family ultimately and drive the business forward. And for most of the people that reach out to me, they've either got a problem and then we say, look, that's not for us. You need a facilitator or you need a mediator or a negotiator to come in and fix that problem. So that's usually where people come through. But most of the people that we usually find that are like, yeah, Ben, hell yeah, we're in, this is awesome, are people that are really proactive. So they've got their shit together. They've worked for the last 10, 15, 20 years on becoming really solid farmers. So they know the game of producing beef, cotton, sheep, whatever that is, small crops. They know how to do that. They've started doing things like they've started surrounding themselves with quality advisors. So they've got a good accountant on their side. They've got a good lawyer. They've got a good banker. Maybe not all of them are perfect. They've started to have a bit of a go at family meetings. They're trying to have a bit of a go at setting up a strategic advisory board. And they've started, and then they go, you know what? We need some help. And that's usually where they pop up and say, look, I don't know how to articulate this, Ben. I really don't know what my actual problem is, but I just know I want to do better. I've got this growth mindset. I always want to do better. I want to set myself up for success. I want to set my wife up for success, or my husband. I want to set my kids up. And so I need help. And that's usually where they come. And it's the ones that usually are proactive that are going, well, I've got a problem, but I can't articulate it. And then we dig into figuring out what that problem is. And invariably, there's usually a couple of things. And number one is they've got a plan, but it's kind of in my head. We've tried to get it on paper. We've got a business plan, and we sort of know we want to buy another farm in 5 years, and we want to increase from 10,000 head of cattle to 20,000, whatever that number is. And so they're going, we need clarity on that, but we need the whole family involved, because up until now, it's all just been often, not always, in dad's head. Could be mum's head. I've got a family where it's all in mum's head. And so they're going, we need to get it out. We need to get everyone on the same page. And quite often a trigger can be where kids start to go off to boarding school or finish school, more likely finish school. And so we've both got a little bit more capacity because the kids are off to school, off on their own life. Then they start thinking, well, what do we want the next 10, 15 years to look like? And, when you're 45 to 50, the next 10 years, you're going to be going through a massive change. Like, you're going to be thinking about transitioning. So they're going, okay, we don't have a plan for this. Number two is we're starting to see communication starting to become changing. It's always been mum and dad and the kids. You're the kids, do what you're damn well told. Now they're starting to become young adults, and that just doesn't work, and they want to change the dynamics. And the third one is they're going, well, we've got these kids. They sort of want to come back to the farm, or they want to be involved in the family business somehow. How do we get them involved? How do we prepare them to not only be good farmers, but good custodians of family wealth, good leaders, good communicators? And there's a combination of those things. And you've got to sort of, in my position, dig in, Ferg, and go, well, for most people, they've got a complex array of challenges or opportunities. And you've got to dig through and think, well, who's the best person to sort that out and in what priority? So if someone comes in and says, look, my farm's unprofitable, we're running it on the line. I need to get some help. Well, then maybe they need to go see someone that can help them with that. Or if they go, look, with our relationships have descended with my parents who might be in their 70s or 80s, maybe they need to go see a facilitator or a mediator or a negotiator to sort that out. So for me, it's mostly about sorting out, can I solve their problems or can I not? And if it's about getting the family all aligned and on the one page, that's great. That's awesome. We can do that. Communication, we can do that. Preparing the next generation, we can do that, and trying to figure that out.
Yeah, excellent. And I think one thing that I've heard in your language is about preparing the next generation, whereas often we hear about maybe succession, it's about mum or dad sort of being the problem, but often there's no one necessarily a problem. It's kind of getting that right. We can say all the things we like about future generations and how they want more and all the rest of it, but in your work, what would be the things that you need to change the mindset of that next generation coming in and I guess the previous generation going out?
Yeah, well, I like to talk about the current and the future generation, or the oldies and the young ones. Usually I find the oldies get a little bit offended, but they're all around my age group now, mate, so I've got to be, It's okay. Generally, there's I've mentioned it already, but there's three things that a family needs to be thinking about. They need to be thinking about preparing the current generation, preparing the family wealth or the agribusiness, and then preparing the next generation. Because the next generation needs to be prepared not just to be good farmers. They can muster the cattle, they can plant the crops. They've got to be taught a whole lot more skills. And we've got to teach them communication skills. We've got to teach them to lose their entitlement, because every child is entitled. I don't care who it is. My daughter, who I work hard on this, she shows signs of entitlement. We've got to train them. And then we've got to get them prepared to think bigger than just themselves as a family. And so we've got to prepare the next generation. But I want to start with mum and dad. So mum and dad have got to, number one, is they've got to change the way they think about the world as the next generation comes in. So they've got to get more open to different ideas, because we do want the next generation to come in and start to propagate some new, fresh blood and ideas into the situation as they get older. So they've got to start thinking differently. We've got to think about them creating a compelling future for themselves. If you're 50 and you're saying, yeah, well, look, I'd like to work on the farm for another 10 to 15 years. Well, what's the compelling future after you finish working on the farm full time? And for most dads, it's terrifying.
That's the most scary thing you can say to me.
Yeah. So we've got to provide a compelling future. And maybe that is you become an employee of your kids who run the farm. Maybe it's you work part-time. Maybe you work till you're 100, whatever's compelling for you. And then we've got to get the current generation to start planning for their financial security in retirement. So they've actually got to think about, the farm can't be my retirement unless I'm going to sell it. So that if I want the next generation to come in, I'm going to have to start preparing for that. So they've got to prepare their mental state for the next stage, start thinking with a growth mindset, and then preparing them financially. So then when it comes to the next generation, we're going to start to prepare them to be able to, if they're on farm, how to run a business, like a proper farming business, not just be a farmer. We've also got to prepare the non-farming siblings to be able to manage wealth, because in most families, one or two siblings might inherit some farming wealth, but then there's going to be some money go down to the non-farming assets from an estate point of view. So we've got to prepare them, and then we've got to prepare that next generation to have the right mindset, leadership, and communication skills to be able to negotiate within the family, if that makes sense. So there's these three components we've got to focus on, but you want to start with mum and dad first. Those three things: yourself, your mindset, a compelling future, and what the next 10 to 15 or even 20 years looks like, and then how to actually financially prepare for your ultimate transition to the next phase.
Yeah, excellent. Typically, how long does that transition take? And that's an impossible question to answer, but typically you're working with businesses for I'm thinking over a range of years. It's not sort of come in and get it fixed on a weekend and then you're off and sorted. It's a process of gaining trust within whoever's involved in that conversation, including with you, and getting to a point where everyone can have real conversations and actually start moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, if someone said to me, put a gun to my head and said, Ben, we want our family to be intergenerationally successful or prosperous. This is what most families want. They want to be more prosperous now, but they want to maintain that across the generations. You look at most farmers, they actually do care what their kids and grandkids end up doing, and that it doesn't all fall apart, because the 3-generation curse is real. So generally I say with the kids, that whole process starts when they hit the ground. When they're born, it's about instilling values, morals, the work ethic, getting them think like an entrepreneur or a business owner, so involving them. So the process is really a whole of life process. But if you came to me, the reason I picked 10 to 15 years is generally in 10 to 15 years, you can see substantial change. So you can see growth. So you can see not only personal growth, but you can also see financial growth, buying another property, scaling up, in putting all your infrastructure in place can be done in a 10-year period, whereas 1 or 2 years, not much is going to change. Also, to building off farm assets and educating the kids is not going to happen in 1 or 2 years. So it's a process. Now, we do ourselves, we have something called what we call the High Performing Families Accelerator Mastermind Program, which runs over 3 years. So we've got a group of families get together, and we're going through this whole process to educate them on how to do this, how to prepare for this ultimate succession and align the family and grow the wealth. So I think, if you're going to tackle this and you're going to get serious and you're going to learn some skills, you need at least 2 or 3 years to be able to go through the process, because when it comes to families or business, it takes time to start to see the results of your input. You don't go put fertilizer on, that's probably not a good example. You don't go buy a bull today and then expect your whole herd genetically to have changed 3 months later. It's like generations it'll flow through.
Yeah, that's a great example considering what we do for a living. So,
yep. That's it. I was trying to find the right analogy. I thought fertilizer probably doesn't work because I throw fertilizer on my grass and it's green the next day. So terrible example.
Yeah, it's I don't know how you find it, but I certainly find in my role it's an absolute kind of honour to get under the hood of these families. And I mean, that's got to be a massive, I guess, when you sort of get out of bed every morning, a massive driver must be that opportunity to work with great because we know there's great families and farms in agriculture. And I always find it fantastic to work with these great people. I'm sure you find similar.
Yeah, I do. I absolutely love it. Yeah, it's great. And it's interesting, Ferg. One of the things that I didn't realise when I first started on, even going into financial advice is often I learn just as much from the families I work with as they learn from me. And I think that's a real great thing. I get to see what works, what doesn't work, understand human beings. And to be honest, but to be real, so many farmers spend all their time talking about the weather, talking about cattle prices, talking about grain prices, complaining about politicians and all those sorts of things. And what I love is when you actually sit down with families and you can have a real conversation about what's important about your family, what you want to achieve in your life, what you want to leave behind, getting clarity on your plan going forward and seeing the changes that can happen when you have those conversations, not only from a monetary point of view, but just from a personal growth point of view is amazing. And for me, I love working with the next generation, mate. I just love watching the next generation because you see the biggest shifts. When we get, I'm 48 now, when we get to our age, mate, we're a lot less flexible than we were when we were 20. Whereas if you see 20-year-olds, you see 20-year-olds, you see 20-year-olds, and you see them between 20 and 25, and you see these young kids, and I call them kids. They're not kids; they're young adults. But the changes in the way they operate and the changes in the family, and you just know that it's going to be that compounding interest of change in styles and the smiles that are put on people's face, especially when they fix a problem. And quite often the problems that I deal with are intangible. It's not like you've got a broken down tractor, you pay a mechanic to come around, they fix that motor and off you go. It's like deep-seated problems. And when you see a family, mate, when they're all on different pages, all unsure, and then you get a strategic plan put together that not only addresses the farm, but addresses everything, the whole family, the total wealth, is just seeing how that can just reduce stress and increase motivation, mate, is, fantastic to see.
Yeah, no, it definitely would be. Obviously, you've started your career in finance and to a certain extent continuing or enabling intergenerational wealth is still financial, but obviously time is the thing that at the end of the day is the thing we've got the least of and probably the thing that we value the most. Where does that come into these discussions in terms of like how are we structuring this business so that we're not just doing the usual farmer thing of sort of 18-hour days and whatever else that your dad's probably done, and my dad certainly has and continues to do, and I do myself. But I guess where's time versus dollars in those discussions?
Well, that's what one of the things we talk about is you've heard me use the word prosperity. And I think prosperity is the word we need to be always keeping in front of mind. And prosperity can be a financial side. It can be, we've got enough money to do what we want to do. And whether that be, pay the bills, buy food, educate the children, go on a holiday overseas, buy a Ferrari, whatever that is that you want. But then there's the other things. It's like, well, what about family relationships? What about time to pursue things other than farming? What about time to spend as a family? What about personal fulfillment? What about lower stress and anxiety? So time falls into there, and it's actually a bit of an interesting one. I'll just give you two examples, mate, where I had two families, and essentially one of them had built systems and processes and spent a lot of time and a lot of money systemizing the business and scaling up. And then he got to the point where actually for one day a week he was twiddling his thumbs. I kid you not, because he just had the team around him and things like that. And he felt an intense guilt about the fact that he wasn't working 18 hours a day. Had another family where there was an accident on farm. They had to put systems and processes in place to keep things afloat. And then they're getting to the point now where they've got some spare time and they're really struggling. So time's a really interesting one. We all crave it, but when we've got it, we've got to figure out, well, what are we actually going to do with that extra spare time? And that's why retirement for a lot of people is so hard, especially farmers, Now I've got all this spare time. What the bloody hell am I going to do? And, they look at their wife and say, hey, Mary, what are we going to do today? She goes, I don't know what you're going to bloody do, Ben, but I'm not going to be doing it with you. So time is really important. And I think there's a real structural challenge we've got in the industry is we judge ourselves as a community on how hard we work. And I gave an example in a podcast recently where I said there was a guy down the road from where I grew up, and I remember he was a cattle duffer, so he stole cattle. He got put in jail for it, complete criminal, and he was knocking these cattle off for people that couldn't afford it. So a real scumbag. But I remember hearing someone one day saying, that Mr. Jones is a real scumbag. He steals people's cattle, but geez, he can work. And it was almost like this whole, just because he could work, Ferg, it sort of brushed over all the bad things he's done. And I think for a lot of us, we work hard because we feel like that's our self-worth and our identity. I'm hardworking, and that's a big challenge for a lot of successful producers to work with, is the fact that if you build a successful business, the idea is to sack yourself and have more spare time so you can go from low-value tasks. And what I call low value is like fixing a fence. It needs to be done. But as a CEO of your family business, you should be doing what I call $10,000 an hour jobs, which is maybe going into town and negotiating better rate with your bank manager, or negotiating a deal to buy the neighbours, or a vertical integration package. So you want to be using your time far better than what a lot are. Yeah.
How often does that come into those discussions between the generations? Like, obviously, mostly, without a bit of a generalisation, but it is pretty real that older generations have absolutely flogged themselves, and younger generations are keen to make sure there's a bit of balance in that situation, which can bring sort of jealousy from old to young, thinking, they're off in Europe and I never went to Europe because I was never allowed to. I had to keep an eye on the sheep or whatever. Is that part of that mindset shift you need across the business, for people to understand that different people value different things to different degrees, and that doesn't make you a bad person if you don't want to work 100-hour weeks?
Yeah. And I think the next generation coming through is a bit smarter than us. They see working 100 hours a week as a failure in your business, not a success. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe sometimes you've just got to hustle and work hard, but you've got to have some balance. Hustle and work hard, you'll eventually burn out. So, there is always some friction. It's more often than not with dads and sons. The son comes home and says, I want to go and have some fun. I want to go see my mates. And the problem is a lot of dads, they forget. They forget back to when they were 20. And a prime example of that, mate, just to go off topic slightly, is I remember a father and a son having a bit of a dust-up because the son wanted to put a new exhaust system on his ute. And it was, an expensive, big exhaust system that made a lot of noise. And I remember I said to Dad, what's the problem with it? He said, he's wasting all his bloody money on this ute and stuff. And I said, well, what did you do when you were 19? What were you driving around? And he said, shut up, Ben. That's nothing to do with this. So I think we forget. And I think, and so the way is communication. We've got to talk about that. And I think, mums and dads have got to really try and impart on the next generation the value of sacrifice to attain a goal. So there's something noble in that, to be able to work hard towards an objective and win the game if that's what you want to achieve. And that game can be whatever game you want to win. And the kids need to understand that you can't necessarily just have the successes up front. What is it Richard Branson said? Successful entrepreneurs do the things today that nobody else will do, so they can do the things in the future that nobody else is able to do. But the younger generation are really good for teaching the parents is that, hey, what is winning at this game? Is it the man or the woman that's worked 100 hours a week? Or is it the person that's worked 40 hours a week or 30 hours a week and achieved the same result? So it is a problem and it is a challenge. But sorry, Mark, you said your audience is all about doing rather than just theory. And one of the things I find can be really handy is what we call the when-thens. So I learnt this when my daughter was 2, and it's a strategy we used to use with her. Is she wanted something and she said, Dad, I want to watch a movie. I'd say, righto, when you've cleaned your playroom, then you can watch a movie. And she wouldn't clean a playroom. She'd come back, I want to watch a movie. I'd say, when you've cleaned the playroom, then you can do that. That's the rule. And so for families on the land, it's like, well, if you do want to do more time off, you want to go to Europe, you want to have some time off, what we need to do is just set some ground rules or some goals. So when this happens, then you can go. So I don't know, branding needs to be done. And then once the branding's all completely done and finished, then we're going to take some time off and you do your trip to Europe or whatever you might want to do.
Yeah, and obviously key to that is sticking to those rules on both ends. It's sort of having, you see often that you might have a when then and then the bit's done, but then there's another thing to do before the then, and that continues to roll and people never get off farm because it kind of continues to evolve. But that's, I think that's part of, that'll be your coaching, judging people through not to do it that way. But
yeah, well, that's a character problem too. I mean, and I make the mistake. My wife talks about the 5-minute job, where I say, hey, Mum, Sarah, Sophie, can you come outside? I've just got to hedge trim that hedge in the garden. I need someone to do X, Y, Z. And she says, how long is it going to take? 5 minutes, we'll just trim it. Next thing, we've trimmed every hedge in the whole garden and started chopping some trees down in the back paddock. And she's like, your 5-minute jobs always turn into 2-day jobs. So that's a character thing. We've got to realise when that starts to happen, call Mum and Dad out if we need to in the right way, but then be able to mature enough and have enough character to go, yeah, look, there's always going to be more jobs to do. I need to give it good thought and give guidelines to the next generations. Because if you tell them, using that example, that you can go to Europe once we've got branding done. I'm just making an example up. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, no, sorry, now we've got to plant the wheat crop. Oh, no, now we've got to build the yards. What you're doing is breaking trust with the kids. You've told them what the rules of the game are, then you're changing the rules, which is completely being untrustworthy. Now, trust and communication are about 60% of the reasons succession or families break apart. So if you're consistently saying, when this happens, then you can do it, then you're breaking trust and you're the problem. Now, the argument against that I quite often get, Ferg, is that they'll say, oh, yeah, but I didn't realise we needed to go then move the irrigation pump or something like that. It's like, well, if you're going to promise something, put an appropriate amount of time into thinking about it. And then they say, oh, yeah, but they put me on the spot when we're in the yards. Well, then be mature enough to go, hey, just give me 24 hours to think about this and I'll come back to you. Like it's this whole communication thing. And I always tell people, who's the adult here? Like if your kids are teenagers and there's some problems here, you're the adult, act like the adult, and let's find a path forward. Don't put your head in the sand. And look, there's something I struggle with my daughter. My favourite saying from my wife is, who's the adult, Ben?
Yeah, it's amazing how all this stuff comes home to roost. I mean, having nothing brings you to your most basic as having kids, I reckon. They can
totally
allow you to go from 0 to 100 in the shortest period of time possible.
Yeah, well, my daughter once said to me, she goes, that's not very good growth mindset, Daddy. Like, oh, Jesus.
Yeah. We were chatting the other day, Ben, before setting up for this one, and you were mentioning that it's often it's often the mums or it's the matriarch of the family that'll be the person who reaches out first. They're often a bit of a stereotype, but they're often the people that sort of see that there's a need to shift, whereas, maybe dad's just happy to be carried off the farm in a box and not too worried about anything other than that. But often I guess it'd be interesting to hear what the proportion of the person who makes that first shift versus, which gender. And because I'm imagining some of these conversations have got some blokes in check shirts with folded arms sitting across the kitchen table from you sometimes.
To start with, yeah. But you actually find the dads are the ones that really get into this, because once they start seeing there's a path to success, they usually get pretty excited about it. So we got to be really kind on the dads to be able to say that's what we're like. Now we're talking in generalizations here, so I just want to acknowledge that this is a rough rule of thumb. But usually what I find is quite often is in your 40s, if someone comes out and says we need to make a change in their 40s, it's usually dad most of the time. Now, what usually happens is kids, quite often for the families I see, because I deal with a lot of people in Queensland, is kids go off to boarding school. So kids go off to boarding school, mums, and again, generalizations could be getting shot here. Everyone forgive me. I'm just going to say it how it is. But usually mum's busy, usually doing all the financial controlling, the administration of the business, running the making sure the HR and the teams are all right, the employees, and then they're trying to deal with all the school stuff. Usually after 20 years, dad pops his head up, early 40s, been working on the farm for 20 odd years, and they go, oh, I'm tired. Something's bloody got to change. And they usually go to mum and say, something's got to change. Mum's usually going, I don't have any time for shit to change. I've got kids off, some kids at home, some kids at boarding school. I've got bloody HR, I've got employee, the story. And dad pops his head up. Now, if nothing happens there after a period of time, dad puts his head back down and keeps driving ahead again. He just pushes through it. Now, in the 50s, in the early to mid 50s, it's usually mum pops her head up. Now, on average, what I quite often see happens is that's when the kids have started to finish boarding school. They're off on their own way in the world. And mum pops her head up and says, well, the business is operating okay. We've got systems and processes. We've got all the financial controlling. We've got employees. Everything's working. And then all of a sudden they've got some spare time and they go, well, I'm just hitting 50, early 50s. I don't want to keep doing this for the rest of our lives. My kids are starting to go off on their own way in the world. What's going to happen with them? Geez, I can see them changing and some friction starting to come in within the family. And then they go, I think we need to change something. And that's when they pop their head up and ask the question. Now, what happens with dads is dads go, 10 years ago, I popped my head up and I've just been head down, bum up. And they're in what we call the acceleration phase, because between 50 and 60, that's usually in the process where the families, they've worked the game out. If you're ever going to work the game out, if you haven't worked it out by the time you're 50, you're in strife. But you know how to produce profits, you know how to scale, you know how to run employees, you know how to run a business. And that's where all the good work starts to come in, almost like the harvest. You planted the crop, you've bloody done everything you need to do, now we're harvesting. And they quite often will pop their head up and go, I'm just too busy harvesting love. I'm just too busy just getting jobs done. And so that's when you get the two times. So usually dad's in their 40s, mum's in their 50s.
Yeah, excellent. That was an unexpected answer. So that's cool. Very good. Just quickly, we'll touch on the mastermind just because I think group processes are really, really powerful. And I guess I'm just interested in your view on that. But I guess the power of the group is always better than the individual, because you can kind of, I don't know, it's more comfortable fixing someone else's problems, even if they're very similar to your own. And how does that work? And does that sort of supercharge the amount you're able to achieve, or is it sort of the same as doing one-on-one? Yeah,
no, definitely the mastermind's much better, more powerful. Don't get me wrong, you need the combination of the two, one-on-one and what we call the group or the mastermind. So just for everyone listening, a mastermind is essentially you put together a group of like-minded people. Now, for me, the mastermind I have, and there's a number of them around Australia that do production masterminds, is a family one. So mum and dad and the next generation. So you can, if you go within a mastermind and if there's an education component attached, so you're learning as you go, it's not just a talk fest. It can be really powerful to learn as mums and dads and also as the next generation coming through. But where the real power is if you can be in a room with a bunch of like-minded, driven, growth-orientated people, the world's your oyster. The transformations I see when you get 10, 20 families in a room and you've got everyone's driven and motivated in their 40s and 50s going, well, and they're wanting to challenge each other So question, what are you doing, where you're going? But they're also wanting to champion each other and get them to succeed. I mean, that in itself is just rocket fuel to happiness and success and prosperity. The other thing is you get your kids also who are in their, say, late teens, early to mid-20s, you get them in the room with another bunch of other kids. I mean, imagine what that's going to do for them in their lives. I mean, talk about an antidote to entitlement. Getting them focused on the vision and starting to train them early. I mean, just that in itself is massive, because I know my mum that was my mum's biggest fear when I was little. She used to say, you lay down with dogs, Ben, you're going to get up with fleas. And she used to always say, you've got to be careful who you surround yourself with. And so this is the thing. And what I've found over the years is which is a really insightful thing, mate, is I'm not saying what I'm saying is insightful, but it was insightful to me.
Yeah.
Was farmers, like I deal with farmers all the time. All my family are farmers. They just sit around talking about the weather, the cattle prices, the new piece of machinery, and that's it. And so you think that farmers just want to talk about that. But when you get them outside, because I don't deal with anything production, so I don't deal with anything inside the farm gate. I deal with the people, the strategic planning, and the building and protecting wealth. So you get them in there and they start talking about the bigger picture with each other, and they start having conversations around communication and personal fulfillment and mindset and happiness. You see most farmers, that are progressive and want to get ahead. It's like almost like they've gone, this is what we've been looking for, because we're sick of talking about the weather. We're sick of talking about beef prices. We just want to focus on what's coming up in the future. And I'd say it's a mastermind is about solving problems, but it's also about dealing with opportunities. And if you talk to the average person, if you spent 99.9% of your day talking about problems and 1% about talking about opportunities, that's going to be a dull life. But imagine if you spent, 20% of your time talking about challenges or problems, and then 80% about opportunities. How much better would life be? How much more exciting would it be? How much more would you achieve? And I think if you actually dig into it, most families that want to get ahead, they don't want to spend all that time talking about the weather and cattle prices or grain prices.
Yeah, awesome. And that's what I expected. So much power in surrounding yourself with good people. And there's all those quotes which I can't remember right now, but definitely the power of the crowd to achieve amazing things will never cease to amaze.
But for the thing with it is most people don't know that. It's not until they get into it. I mean, I was involved I had a business coach for years when I had the financial advice practice and became part of a mastermind. And I remember my wife joined the business when she was an engineer, and she came back and joined the financial advice business. And I remember talking to her about, we used to do the one-on-one coaching with the business coach to be able to go, where are we going? What are we doing? How are we going to go? And then I said, you've got to come along to the masterminds. And I remember saying, look, I get the one, why do I want to go to a mastermind? I mean, she's an introvert. I'm in a room full of people that I don't know that's just talking about their problems. She's like, this sounds like hell. She came along, and I remember her saying every time we went, she's like, this is the most valuable thing, sitting in a room with people that are dealing with the same problems, that have either achieved or fixed those problems, that are all focused on helping everyone else achieve. It's like it touches something in your soul. It's like what we've been looking for. It's that connection, being connected with people, because the rural community quite often is so disconnected. And this is a way of getting connection back with yourself, your colleagues, but also your family, mate.
Yeah, and disconnected and can be lonely, particularly if you're of that mindset, want to grow, and you're up the road or up the valley with a heap of people that kind of aren't that way wired. Like finding people that don't just want to talk about the rugby or the weather or the footy or the whatever, and actually are willing to have those business discussions is not easy often if you don't know where to look, and you only know who you know.
Yeah. And it's interesting, mate. I don't know if you've got this in New Zealand. I guess you have, is the tall poppy syndrome.
Yeah, it's massive here, mate. It was invented here.
Yeah. Well, if it was invented there, it was perfected over here. And so this is the thing. People really struggle. So a lot of the people that come and see me, they're like, I've got a lot of mates. I go to a local footy club. I'm involved in the local show society or the camp drafting society. And I've got a lot of people to talk to. But I can't talk about this shit, man. I can't talk about the problems in my family, with communication. I can't talk about my strategic plan. I can't talk about, some sort of new thing they're doing, because people just judge me, or I feel judged, or I don't feel, or they look at me like I'm a weirdo. And so they're like, I'm surrounded by people, but I feel lonely. professionally. And so when you get them in a room with other people like that, and they look around and they go, shit, there's other people like me. So there's some real great value in actually doing that.
Excellent, Ben. We could chat this stuff all day because we both love ag to the similar extent by the sound of it. And I will say I've been binging your podcast over the weekend and really enjoying the AgriCoach podcast that you put out. So I wanted to make sure I'll get that plug in there because it is great. You're talking to people who are going through this plus just other people in ag, which is great. And I think I feel so lucky to be in the kind of era that we are, where we can get great information every day. Like there's literally every time you're doing those boring jobs, you can always be learning because you can have something in your ears, like just chipping away. So definitely recommend people jump on the AgriCoach podcast. Before we do close down, just keen to ask the last couple of questions, which we ask all guests these days. And the first one is, what's the last thing you changed your mind about?
I agonised over this because I change my mind a lot, mate. And I believe that's because I try and be flexible in my thinking, which sometimes is harder than it seems. But I think I'd probably say the biggest thing that's changed my mind and that I'd want to share with everyone is this whole more money will solve all my problems. That couldn't be further from the truth. More money, yes, I totally get that. If there's more money in there, it'll solve some of your problems, but there's just going to create more. So whilst you want to focus on making more money, being more profitable, being more sustainable, even the most successful farming businesses have failed because they haven't addressed the most important part, which is the family side of things. And so, yeah, that was the biggest change for me. Is I used to always think, because I thought as a kid growing up, more money in our family situation would have fixed it, but it wouldn't have. I know that now. It was just a symptom of it was a symptom. So yeah, that was the number one thing that's probably been the biggest paradigm shift in the last, let's say, decade for me.
Yeah. Cool. And the final question, which is a new one, we've asked it a few times now, but who's the best human you've had the opportunity to learn from?
Well, mate, being a podcaster, you're probably not surprised that I listen to a lot of podcasts. My wife calls herself a podcast widow because I'll wander around the house doing things with one ear in listening to things. I'd have to say I've done a lot of listening to over the years, and probably has had the biggest profound impact on me was listening to Joe Rogan. Now, nothing to do with what I do in my career, but he epitomizes strength, which I think physically and mental, which I love to listen to because I think we all need to be physically and mentally strong if we want to succeed. But also, too, he embodies that real curiosity. And I think if families injected a whole lot of curiosity into their situation about how to do things better, how to communicate better, understanding each other, the world would be a better place. And every time I listen to a quality Joe Rogan podcast, I come away with some learnings. And I think I just think that's probably the person that I've listened the most to and garnered the most knowledge. And it's probably, if I had to summarize it down to one word, that would be character. Whenever I listen to him, he displays a strong sense of character. And I think if as a man or a woman, if you embody a strong sense of character, life is going to be a lot more fun and a lot easier.
Yeah, 100%. That's a great answer, and the reason we've added it to the repertoire lately because I think it definitely brings out something every time. So yes, really appreciate that. I actually have listened to a little bit of Joe Rogan, but not enough to. But it sounds like I probably should. When I see those timelines, I'm like, whoa, I haven't got 2 hours or whatever to sit and listen. But obviously, you just have to do it over a few bites. But yeah, 100%. I've probably could get accused of cruising around the house with one ear listening to someone else fairly regularly as well. Although I think my wife's just as bad these days, so we're both listening to somebody. But anyway, really appreciate your time, Ben. It's been great to have a chat. Great to get to know you a little bit, and hope we'll see you in Tamworth. Will be fantastic to actually meet in person. And yeah, love what you're doing for ag. Love the podcast. So yeah, hopefully we'll get a few people listening along. And I think what you're doing is really important, and we'll see ag go well.
No, fantastic, Ferg. Thanks for letting me come on and have the conversation. As I said, I could talk about this stuff for days, but I look forward to having you back on the podcast, and we're going to start to talk about, I believe, genetic improvement. So, because I'm all about high performance, so high performing families, high performing individuals, and leaders. So, if we can talk about high performance genetics, I reckon that'd be a great conversation, mate.
Sounds good, mate. Both things, finances and genetics, both compound, and both passions. So, it sounds like fun, mate. Looking forward to that one, and all the best.
Thanks, Ferg.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks again to Heineken, who are proud world leaders in the manufacturing and supply of professional sheep shearing and clipping equipment. Thank you to MNSD Animal Health and Norflex Livestock Intelligence. They offer an extensive livestock product portfolio focused on animal health management, all backed up by exceptional service. We thank both of these companies for their ongoing support of the Head Shepherd podcast.